Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 15 of the Lebanese Biodiversity podcast. My name is Mira, and I am an entomologist. Our guest today is Leila Mouawad. Leila is a forester, science communicator, and researcher currently working at the Nature Conservation Center of the American University of Beirut. We will be speaking to her about high mountain ecosystems, their flora, their forests, and their importance. Leila has also provided us with several resources that you can check out if you want to learn more about the subject or if you're looking for volunteering opportunities or participating in ongoing programs on the topic. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you on the next one. Good evening, Leila. How are you today?
مرحبا ميرا, all is well.
Can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yes, sure. So basically, I'm someone with a background in agronomy, and then I completed a master's in forestry in Lebanon. I am someone who's very passionate about forest communication in all its forms and especially photography. I do take photos of species that I find beautiful and unique. And on a professional level, I have been working at the American University of Beirut in its Nature Conservation Center as a researcher for almost a year and a half now.
Okay, thank you. So, when discussing the introduction to this episode with you, you told me that you had studied forestry at the Lebanese University. So, I, for one, was not aware that this existed. Can you tell us more about this program and how people can get into it?
Yes, okay, so basically, the Lebanese University and the Faculty of Agronomy specifically in the Kwene is the only place in Lebanon where one can study forestry. As a prerequisite, you need a bachelor's degree in agronomy or any related field. Then you're qualified for this master's degree, which is a 2-year program that ends with a thesis defense and gives you the title of agriculture engineer.
Okay, that's really cool. And so, what are your job prospects or what opportunities does it open after this? I suppose you can still work as a classical agricultural engineer because you do have this diploma. But what else can you do with this specialty?
Exactly. So, of course, you can work as an agriculture engineer, but there's also a wide range of possibilities that one can do. So, you could be working in ecosystem restoration, which includes deforestation, for example. You can also be working in conservation in situ or in labs, in protected area management. And here we're talking about nature reserves, HIMAs, and other types. Another aspect is education, rural tourism, forest fire management, and the list goes on, but there's also other lesser known job prospects of forestry that are not very common in Lebanon, which is basically wood industries and forest certification, forest communication, forest therapy, and urban forestry.
Okay, so that is a wide range of specialties or job prospects that you could go into. But what I can also highlight is that it can either be more related to conservation and managing the logistics in a forest, like, for example, as you mentioned, for fires or risk of fires, but it could also be more in the production field. So, in something that would be more classically what an agricultural engineer would do, and work in the wood industry, which also I was not aware that was possible. That was a possibility in Lebanon.
Not much. Wood industries is lesser known in Lebanon, but it's mostly focused on forest conservation, as you mentioned. But on the international scene, wood industries and forest certification, they're gaining lots of interests because wood is
Okay.
being framed as, an alternative material to many others like cement, like plastic, iron. So that's why.
Okay, I see. So I think it's also important to mention for everything that you just said, it is also a possibility to be able to work abroad for people who do this kind of specialty, or at least to work abroad for a while or participate in projects that are happening between Lebanon and abroad.
Exactly.
And what? what made you pursue this specialty? Why did you decide to go into forestry?
Okay, I have been passionate about nature since as long as I can remember. Nature is where I find inspiration, it's where I find spirituality. And even recently, amid all the madness we were seeing in humanity with the wars, with the killing and destruction, nature was still my go-to place to find inner peace, at least. So besides that, in my third year of university, we had to pick a specialty, which was basically either food production or plant production, plant protection. Uh, but I was curious to discover a new major. And honestly, not many encouraged me to go into forestry, but that was a challenge I was willing to accept. And today I can say that I'm glad I took this step at least.
Okay. Well, people not encouraging you to go into something, I think, is a recurrent theme,
Mm,
because we have this universal fear of not being able to find enough job opportunities in certain fields. But well, in the end, there are job opportunities in almost any specialty.
exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
I'm glad that you pursued it anyway. And now for another follow-up question on this is, what is your favorite tree species? It can be native or not. So,
Now, of course, it's gonna be native.
okay, fine.
Now, that's a tricky question because I'm a Gemini, so I don't really have any favorites in life. But before I answer your question, I just want to take this chance to highlight that, yes, the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about forests is trees. But forests are much more than that. They are soil, they are plants, animals, fungi, people, water, and all the interactions happening in between. But back to your question and to answer it, one of my favorite tree species and one of the trees that I truly appreciate is Arbutus andrachne, the strawberry tree that we call in Arabic atlib.
Mhm.
This tree goes through so many morphological changes throughout the year. It bears delicious fruits, and it is one of the lesser known natives. So next time you go on a hike and you see a colorful tree with a twisting bark, that's arbutus, and I guess that's one of my favorite trees.
Okay, well, this is really great. And I absolutely love this tree, and I'm very happy to see it take more visibility, because, as you say, it is kind of discreet.
Hmm.
It's I don't have the impression that when you find that you have these large populations, like you have some isolated trees in a given area, but they are absolutely beautiful. Are the fruits edible? Did you just
Yes,
said, but like, are okay.
yes, they are edible and they are delicious. I can say that they taste like a very ripe apple or a peach, but you have to try them to tell by yourself. And I even know that some people turn them into jelly, into jam,
Okay.
which is interesting as well. But about the point about isolated species and not having them in a big population, I would recommend people to hike Darb al-Sama, which starts in Sahel Alma and goes up to Harissa. This is a place where I have seen so many arbutus populations. So you have a dense forest, which has pines and oaks, but also so many arbutus trees. And if you go more than once throughout the year, you're gonna see the different colors.
Okay, this is great. Thank you for the recommendation. So now I'll jump on to the next section where I had a few questions on your current work now.
Hmm.
And you already mentioned that you are currently working as a researcher at the American University of Beirut. Can you give us an overview of your current work and the current projects that you are working on?
Yes, so basically, I am an in-house researcher, which means that I work on multiple projects and not something specific. There have been so many interesting projects this past year and a half, but I'm just gonna list my top three. So the latest is something that we are currently still working on, and it deals with community-based tourism in Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. What we're doing is trying to assess the impacts of climate change and identifying pathways to increase the resilience of communities in a very participatory manner. Another thing that we did was work with UNDP on high mountains, where we organized expert consultations to gather insights and get recommendations that were to feed into the high mountain master plan that UNDP was developing for the ministries. And almost a year ago, just as the war was starting, my colleague and I worked on a preliminary assessment of the impacts of white phosphorus, and this helped us clarify many misconceptions about the legality of the weapon and its effect on the land, on economy, and of course on people. So these would be my favorite, top three favorite projects at least.
Okay. Um, my next question was related to that, which is what would you consider your most impactful work? I mean, by that I also mean what is your favorite work, because this would maybe be the closest to your heart.
Mm. Now, of course, the professional aspect of my work is something very impactful because we're working with communities, we're dealing with weapons that impact biodiversity on the long run. But aside from the professional aspect of work, things I take great pride in is getting to speak up for Lebanon and highlight its beauty when all the media is showing is pictures of destruction and death. So, for the past 5 years, I have gotten to speak at conferences, write articles, take photos, tell stories about Lebanon. And this made people aware about this country and the amazing potential that we as people have. And honestly, this is where I feel that my voice, my photos, and the stories that I share have an impact.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for the work that you do. I agree that it is incredibly important to share everything that we know about the biodiversity of Lebanon to be able to move forward with the conservation. But I mean, also not just Lebanon, the region in general. And
Exactly.
also, I am hopeful that some research is starting to emerge on the use of white phosphorus and its long-term effects, because from what I understand, until now, there is very little published research on the subject, and this is something that will be direly needed in the next few years to understand how we can move forward.
Exactly. So the only research that is published is done on test fields, testing grounds where usually US armies were trying the weapon. So it's à ne pas comparer with what's happening in the context of a war.
Yes.
There's lots of efforts being done lately especially led by ministries, Ministry of the Environment and of Agriculture, to try to collect soil samples, come up with guidelines. So things are moving, but it's not an easy prospect to handle.
No, and as we know, that research never moves fast enough in these
Mhm.
situations. Well, I we can only hope that in the future, well, in the near future, more work will be done to support the communities that need to go back to their lands urgently.
Hopefully.
And again, thank you very much for being an active participant in this work. Um, for this next section, after discussions with you, we decided to choose one of your specialties, or, well, one of the topics that you have worked on extensively, which is high mountain ecosystems. So, when we say high mountains, just to clarify, at which altitude do we begin?
Okay, so just to set the context about why we decided to pick mountains as a topic for this session. In Lebanon, we're lucky to have two long mountain ranges. So the Mount Lebanon range and the Anti-Lebanon range, سلسلة الغربية والشرقية, which both have some of the highest peaks in the Levant. By definition, high mountains occur at 1,500 meters above sea level. And although the altitude feels very high, it is an integral part of the surface area of Lebanon. So basically, high mountains represent around 22% of Lebanon's territory. And this is why this piece of land needs to be given more attention.
Okay. So, well, this is a significant chunk of Lebanon, I would say. But yes, I agree that we are lucky to have that many mountains on the territory. What is the importance of these high mountain ecosystems?
Okay. Now, based on my studies and other studies, including an assessment of ecosystem services of high mountains that the Nature Conservation Center led in 2020, I can note down a few points. First, most of the water that we use comes from snow that accumulates on mountains and feeds aquifers. And this is why Lebanon is actually considered a water-rich country. Second, essential ecosystems for biodiversity are found in mountains. Many species thrive in these places. And here we're talking about the juniper, about endemic flora. Even migratory birds are attracted to high mountains where they land and rest for a few days. Many of our emblematic species thrive on high mountains, such as the cedar tree. And basically, from a biodiversity perspective, high mountains are considered important bird areas, important wildlife areas, and important plant areas. Moreover, high mountains are a key contributor to food security. We all know that apples and cherries are grown on such high altitudes. Also, grazing occurs in the Jerid, in high mountains. Beekeepers usually take up their beehives in the summer to high mountains where they can feed on wild thistles. And another point is rural tourism. So many hiking trails are located in high mountains. And of course, listeners know the Lebanon Mountain Trail, which starts in Andit in Akkar and goes all the way down to the south. Um, Mountains are also a key destination for winter sports. We all know the theory, 5 دقايق من الجبل للبحر.
Yes.
And most importantly, in my own opinion, is the cultural symbolism of mountains. Mountains in our culture represent majesty. They are found in our prayers, in our songs, in our stories and tales, and this makes them an integral part of our natural heritage.
Well, thank you very much for this impressive list of resources that we can find in the mountains, be it well, renewable resources, everything pertaining to biodiversity, or how they can be used in extensive agriculture. But also, yes, thank you for highlighting the symbolism and also their importance for the culture because um, we, well, they already harbor the cedar tree, which is very important culturally, but we have the tendency to overshadow other species when we speak about the cedar, for example.
Mhm.
And I have the same impression with mountains, which is when we mention mountains, we sometimes overlook all of the extremely diverse fauna, flora, but also set of services and resources that they offer to us.
Exactly.
Well, there was something that I also wanted to ask you about in this section, which is going back to the fauna and flora.
Mhm.
Can you briefly explain what is an endemic species? And basically just, tell us a bit about all the endemic species that we can find in high mountains in Lebanon. Why do we have so many?
Yeah. So first, I'm not a geneticist myself, but I believe such a person would be able to explain endemism a bit better. But just in a nutshell, endemism is when a species occurs in a specific place and only in that specific place, naturally at least. So plant endemism in the Lebanese mountains is exceptionally high, and this is due to a combination of many factors linked to the geography and topography of the place, climatic conditions, and of course, historical factors. But the main factor is that these mountains, due to their steep slopes, to their valleys and varying altitude, create what we call microhabitats. And this is where species evolve in isolation, which leads to endemism. And I think that's it basically. I do not know many endemic, or at least I cannot list endemic species unique to high mountains because I'm very bad with names. But I know lots of irises that grow only in specific regions. We have also tree species that are endemic to the high mountains, such as the juniper and cedar that we already mentioned. Um, so yeah. There's also there's also the carnivorous plant Drosera rotundifolia. It also grows on specific altitudes and specific environments. So lots of endemism, lots of plants, not a single name from my end.
Okay, so a little interruption here just to give you a few numbers that I was trying to remember during the episode and could not. These numbers were given to us by Christy Atala in her interview a few weeks back, and we have more or less 94 endemic plant species in Lebanon that are strictly endemic to Lebanon. More or less 12% of the plant species that are endemic to the region, and so the Levant, the greater region. And in addition to these, we also have the plants like the cedar and the juniper that Leila was mentioning that can only live at above a certain altitude in Lebanon. Back to the episode. But
But I
yes,
remember that it was an important chunk. It was a very significant proportion. So we are
yes, there
lucky
was a
really to
lot.
have such a level of endemism. And this is due to the fact that 22% of our land is located above 1500 meters, which is such a unique altitude for the region.
Yes, which is impressive. But from your answer, I already got the point that I was hoping that you would highlight, which is with high altitude comes all the microhabitats and all the conditions that create a lot of diversity because you would have a lot of different available habitats and also lots of opportunities for endemic plants. So also just further highlighting the importance of these high mountain altitudes for, well, flora and fauna in general.
Exactly.
So, well, now that we have an idea about their importance and kind of what lives up there, what are the steps that are being actively taken for the conservation in Lebanese mountain ecosystems? Well, this could be Lebanon or Levant in general. Or what steps should be taken if you identify courses of action that still need to be taken?
Okay. Um, I do know that the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, alongside with the government and specifically the Ministry of Environment, are working on a high mountains master plan, which is already a great step to avoid further degradation of high mountains. And also now with the mandate of Minister Nasser Yassin, the Ministry of Environment is working a lot on illegal quarries, wildfires, biodiversity protection. So things are already happening in this end. Some NGOs are, on the other hand, working on reforestation, but this is a bit controversial in high mountains because, there's always this debate, should we plant above the tree line or not? So there's different schools of thoughts in this end. And globally, I know that the Mountain Partnership Secretariat under FAO works a lot also and supports many governments and organizations in protecting their mountains. And there's also for the younger listeners, the Mountain Youth Hub, which I'm part of, which is a network for mountain youth globally. And it also works on capacity building for these people, but also all with the hope of protecting our high mountains.
Okay, so a lot is already being done.
Mhm.
And well, let's just hope that the efforts will continue in the near future. What do you consider the most important challenges of working on conservation projects in the high mountains? Again, it could be in Lebanon in particular.
There's so many challenges, unfortunately. Even though so many actors are working to protect these ecosystems, there's always going to be rising challenges. So, first, these ecosystems are highly sensitive to climate change, which manifests in an altitudinal shift of species, a reduction in snowfall, and a faster snowmelt, which are all going to have repercussions, of course, on water, on biodiversity, on everything happening on mountains. There's also another social aspect, which is rural exodus. So many people are leaving mountains, especially youth. They go to either abroad or to urban areas seeking better opportunities for education or to work. And the most serious, in my opinion, challenge is land exploitation and degradation. So we're talking about quarries, illegal waste dumps, pollution, and uncontrolled urban development. Another challenge is irresponsible tourism, where tourists go for a hike in high mountains and throw their waste or hike a trail in big groups exceeding the site's capacity, or ride an ATV or jet ski. So they basically disrupt any chance of natural regeneration or growth of seedlings. And lastly, the war itself. I believe everyone who has searched the word Lebanon in the past month has seen entire mountains being erased and just exploding, which is crazy because these ecosystems have taken thousands of years and even millions of years to take shape. And all it takes is a few seconds to just bring them down. So that's crazy in my opinion.
Okay, so a lot of challenges
Mm.
that stand at the face of conservation and a call for action for the younger generation here interested in mountain ecosystems or in nature conservation in general. I think we do need a lot of people working on this in the near future, in the future.
Yes, you
Don't
do.
hesitate.
You do.
So, yeah, this brings us to our next point, which is how can the younger generation or the public in general participate in conservation of high mountain ecosystems? So, one thing that you pointed out is being responsible while being out in nature, while hiking, like not throwing waste, not disrupting the wildlife. What other things or what other steps can the general public do to participate in this?
Okay, so I believe citizen science is essential. Scientists can never collect enough data about high mountains, so documentation by citizens, by locals, is essential. And this was actually the basis for my thesis, although it wasn't in the context of high mountains. And moreover, we need support in spreading awareness. So whenever someone learns an information about the importance of high mountains, about ways that we could conserve them, it's good to share that information. And as mentioned previously, we need to adopt sustainable practices, whether it's in agriculture, in tourism, in any activity that we do. What else? I think that's what the general public needs to do, at least as a first step. And even many practices, people who live in high mountains need to think, are they treating their wastewater? Are they using polluting materials? Are they dumping hazardous waste in their land? Because in the end, all of that is gonna feed into groundwater, which is basically distributed to all the entire Lebanese population. So, what is their footprint on high mountains and on nature?
Okay. Well, thank you. And if you have any suggestions that you would like us to link in the post for volunteering, for example, or internship opportunities, we'll also be happy to share those.
Hmm.
And because I sometimes get questions and never know what projects are hiring or need interns or volunteers. So that's also always useful information to put out there if you have something going on.
Sounds good.
And the second half of that question, which I ask every time, is what is the role of governmental entities and environmental NGOs in this? So again, in the conservation of high mountain ecosystems.
Okay. So I know that we often tend to take matters in our own hands in Lebanon, but I do believe that no one can ever replace the government. Different ministries, such as the Ministry of Environment, Agriculture, Public Health, Public Works, Ministry of Tourism, they all need to work together and align their strategies because the amount of overlap in these strategies and even sometimes um, some activities are contradictory. So they need to work on that. Parliament members from their end need to enact laws to protect and promote high mountains and also to support accountability of people who have illegal quarries or do any damaging activities. And so I also think the government needs to work on zoning, so giving a protection status for specific zones that are rich in biodiversity, that have microhabitats for specific species. But this needs to be done with the community in a participatory manner. We cannot just go and tell the community, you cannot use this piece of land which you own, basically. They need to find at least to meet the community halfway. And from their end, NGOs need to engage communities as well and attract funds into projects that support the conservation of mountains, in my opinion. And they also need to raise awareness for the community and raising awareness about science is not just highlighting scientific facts like we're stating right now. They also need to link it to the local heritage, to livelihoods, to things that resonate with people, if I'm making any sense.
Yes, yes, you
So,
are.
yeah, that's basically it.
So one point that I would highlight from what you just said is that when governmental entities or official entities or NGOs want to do this type of work, it is important that they be aware of the needs of the local community, of
Hmm.
the links that the local community already has with their land, be it through the cultural significance, but also sometimes the practical use of the land, the
Of
plants,
course.
or, well, basically, if it's their livelihood, also the way they use the land for their livelihood. So, yes, I do.
And
Yes, go on,
yes,
sorry.
just to add to what you just said, Mira, there's so many ways where we can use the land without exploiting it. And these are ways that we are well aware of. So, foraging and collecting wild edible plants is something we have been doing for centuries and for so many years. But it's something that if someone, an expert, tells you that this is a practice where you are benefiting from the land without harming it, then it makes much more sense. Okay, I'm contributing to conservation somehow. Same for tourism, which is sustainable and regenerative somehow, where you're going into nature. If you see a piece of garbage, you grab it. So not harming the space that you're visiting, but instead contributing to its protection is also something that we have in our culture. Of course, there are different types of people. There are people who do nothing except harm nature, but there's so many people who are connected to the land and treat it as their home, at least. And I think this is something that we need to build on. And there are so many local champions that we could shed light on. And what you're doing in your podcast is something already contributing to that. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much. And well, we are almost at the end of this talk. What advice would you give to people who want to go into forestry?
Okay. Um, I think I'm gonna give a piece of advice that applies to anyone, not just people seeking to work in forestry specifically, but anyone wanting to work in conservation or a field that not many encourage them to take the step. So first, dream and dream big. And also brace yourself for the unexpected. I personally was never expecting to be on this podcast. I wasn't expecting to speak at conferences. I wasn't expecting to have my master's thesis published, for example. So trust the universe, and you know you're gonna go places where you never imagined yourself be in. Another piece of advice is to go beyond borders and look into cross-cutting themes that you are passionate about. So, of course, if you study forestry or biodiversity or whatever, it's good that you get a full grasp of this discipline, but also look into other cross-cutting themes. So for me, it was communication. For you, it might be art, history, or any other discipline or a skill that you could use to support your passion. And lastly, failure is an integral part of life and never its end. So this applies to everything, basically, whether you're failing at university, in your work, in relationships, in cooking a cake, in baking a cake. So do not be afraid of making mistakes. But what matters is that whenever you make a mistake, make sure that you learn from this failure and move on.
Thank you very much. This is the kind of career advice that I wished I had when I was fresh out of the university. So,
لا جواب مسليبان طلعت يعني
but this is what you need to hear. People should tell you, go for it.
yeah,
And don't be afraid to fail. It's very important to hear that.
exactly. It should be our daily reminder.
Yes. And now for the final question that I have for you today. Uh, do you have any closing ideas that you would like to end this interview with? It could be shout outs, programs, anything that comes to your mind.
Okay. I think I'm gonna take this opportunity to address the younger people. First, university is great. It is essential. But what counts is the extra work and sleepless nights that you do. So don't stick to what uni has to offer, but seek more. Second, volunteer, and you mentioned that already, Mira. So give wholeheartedly without expecting anything in return. And this will help you build your CV and also learn what you like and what you don't, because you know you never want to go into field and stick with that for life and ending up doing something that you don't like. And the only way to find out if you like something or not is just to try it hands-on. And most importantly, find a group of like-minded people. I think we can share a few links in the caption, but if you like mountains, you can join the Mountain Youth Hub. If you like forests, there's the Mediterranean Youth Task Force. And if you like biodiversity, there's the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. So we're going to add links to all of those if Mira accepts.
Yes,
And
yes, of course.
I think that's it from my end.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And there's already a lot of room for young people to participate in ongoing programs. So thank you for gathering a little list that we will be able to share. And most importantly, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed recording this.
Thank you so much, Mira. I loved being here.